Hello and welcome to Butter Neya Time. My name is Neya. I am a late 20-something-year-old Australian, born and raised. I've been living specifically in Asia for the last 5 years. Some of you may have seen me on YouTube or Instagram, where I mostly create travel and lifestyle content, usually through a very fun and refreshing lens. And you guys can follow me at Neya or Super Neyan on Instagram or YouTube. So I love thinking and talking, and for such a long time I wanted to make a thought-based podcast just discussing concepts, society, cultural nuances, just ideas and experiences, and I'm all about like opening people up to new things or just talking about things and kind of seeing what other people's views are on it. So here I am. I finally made my podcast, so thank you so much for joining. Yeah, I think I do my best thinking while eating peanut butter. So welcome to Butter Neya Time. In today's podcast, we're talking about friends. Friends is a really interesting topic. You know, there are just so many different ways to skin the cat with friends. Everyone has different experiences with friends, different needs, different wants. But today I'm really going to talk about my views on friendship and really how to manage friendships, because I think this is something that is a constant throughout life, whether you have one friend, thousands of friends. It's something that you really have to think about, and it affects all of us every day. Overall, this is gonna sound like kind of a bit pessimistic and dark, but I think friends are always going to let you down. Humans are always going to let you down. So you need to protect your own feelings. And I think the best way to go about friendship is to expect nothing. Let me explain that in a little bit more detail later in this podcast. But maybe let's first get into how I came to this mindset of having a low expectation from friends and why. So I think for growing up, I am the youngest, of two. So there's my parents, obviously, my sister who's older than me by 4 years, and then myself. And if you guys haven't heard my sister and I's podcast, it's called The Art of I Don't Know. You can also listen to it on Spotify, all the channels, on all the platforms, where we just chat about life and experiences as well and talk about juicy topics. So give that a listen. I'll link it below in this video for the YouTubers that are watching. But yeah, so I'm a younger sibling. And I think when you're younger sibling, you do a lot of observation, right? You just, sitting in the background, listening, watching, seeing how people behave. You get because I'm 4 years younger, I get the ability to learn from my sister a lot and understand like what she goes through, and also see what my parents go through. Because I think something I want to make really clear here is I think this friendship, this view on friendship comes from viewing people of many ages going through friendships. And yeah, let's dig into that. So younger sibling, I think my family as a whole, we are like very loyal people. And I think we expect quite a lot from relationships, and I think we expect like people to meet us at the same level. And I would say, I feel like that's kind of why I've seen really interesting experiences with friendships, because I think all of us in our family have really, we feel like we bring a lot to a friendship because we give a lot to people. That's just how we are as people. And I think my parents have always been super warm, very genuine people. Like if you ask them for help, if you ask them for something, if you need them, if you want to just chat, like they are the people that will go above and beyond to do that, even if you're a stranger. And so yeah, like my parents are the people that all my friends who know my parents, like they talk to them about their lives. Like my parents ask about how you are, what are you doing? You know, they have interest in people. And I don't think like people do that very much nowadays. So many people are very like single-minded, and they think about themselves and like what they can get out of you. So I really respect that so much about my parents. I think it's really hard to live life being that sort of personality, because you can get taken advantage of a lot. And I think that's what I see in friendships a lot, is like people around me get taken advantage of, and really get let down, and disappointed by people who don't show up for them. So yeah, I think being the younger sibling, have seen so much through my parents and my sister, you know, like people like just treat them like you know, my parents and my sister, I think, are amazing people who put themselves out there so much and just get it kind of thrown back in their face, which is not nice. So yeah, and I think what kind of breaks my heart sometimes is I feel like I wish that my family members had better people sometimes around them, because I do think like they've just been let down by friendships. And there's a certain point at which friendships, and same for me, like they just start to dishearten you and they make you think like, okay, maybe I should protect myself more, right? So I think that's kind of the view that I started to take at a younger age. So I think observing, you know, my sister go through having really close friends in high school, but then they do things to her, like, you know, even in primary school, like people be bullied around me. You could just see how people would behave to others. And yeah, so I think at a young age, I realized, hey, people are a little like transient. Not that I knew that word when I was like 10, let's be clear. But you kind of start to see human behavior and you're like, maybe it's better to like go this alone. So I think in high school, I was always the kid who, I always like was friends with a lot of people, but I wasn't super close friends with them. And I wouldn't really belong to like a group per se. I kind of just floated because I did kind of feel I didn't want to lock myself down into a group. And I felt with being part of a group in like high school and things like that, it required being like conforming into like things that those people did or socializing in certain ways. And I think like maturity wise, I just wasn't there. Like I wasn't really great around guys. I wasn't really good at like specific sports. I wasn't really good at like beauty things or like, yeah, I just felt like there wasn't a group that I really belonged in. And that's, I think, a reason why I kind of had a little bit more of independent mind. And maybe that was influenced as well by feeling like, I can't really rely on others based on what I've seen. And so there's no need to, is kind of my view. So that's kind of like I started to form an independent view in mind when I was younger in high school without even realizing it. But I think also from this stemmed the idea of having a best friend. So I think let's talk about this for a second, because I think best friends is such an interesting concept. If I'm being honest, I think having a best friend is something I've always yearned for in life, because I think, and this is influenced by like film, books, like advertising for like a best friend, like charms. Like, you know, when you were younger at the jewelry store, they would sell like those necklaces that matched and you had like a best friend charm. Stuff like that, you know, it's like, it's cute, but it makes you feel like you have to have a need for a best friend or that you should have one. And in movies, you'd have like these best friends that like grew up together and they spend all the time together, and like that's like an important thing. And so I think that, yeah, the whole idea of having a best friend is so interesting. And it's something I've yearned for like ages. And I think in high school and primary school, I definitely tried to like have like a best friend, but it felt very unnatural. And I feel like every time I did say like, hey, you're my best friend, I would get like super let down. And so that through experience made me realize as well to be a little bit more independent and not rely on friends, because I felt like, hey, maybe they're not on the same page as me, and I never really felt like someone reciprocated that in any way. And that's why now I actually do have a best friend who I consider my best friend. But that's because she's probably the only people who's ever like shown up and being consistent like with our friendship, like never let me down, never done anything where I'm like, very questionable. It's just like always been so consistent as a person. And that's because I think she's absolutely amazing. So in my later years of life, like when I was like 22, I met her, and yeah, I think she's incredible. So shout out to her. So so I think observing her as a younger sibling and my family and like people around me go through having time with friends made me realize to be more independent. And then also my own experiences, with the idea of having a best friend and like this notion of it, and then realizing you don't really need one and it has to happen organically. But also the idea of tying yourself down to like one friend is also not necessary. And so I think bringing these two things, like these things together, it made me realize that it was a really interesting strategy. I think it formed unexpectedly, but I just started to feel like my view would be that essentially friends for me, when I first meet you, you start at a you start at a zero in terms of expectation. Like I do not expect anything from you. And I think that's the best way to enter a friendship is no expectations. Because when you go into that without any expectation, anything that the person does, you're like, that was nice, interesting, right? So I think if I go into it with zero expectation, then I can just observe and see how the person behaves, and I can come to it fully as myself, giving my all, and say like, hey, this is just who I am and as a friend, and this is how I'm going to show up, but that's because of me, and that's who I want to be to any person that I am a friend with. But if you don't show up like that, that's okay. I will just observe and understand like at what level you are and what your expected level is as a friend, and then set that expectation in my mind once I'm ready. So for instance, let's say I have a friend who, like, something that really annoys me is like tardiness, like not being on time to things. And I used to get really upset when people would be really late for things. But I got to this period where I was like, okay, you know what? Instead of getting upset and getting disappointed at it, like making it feel like a reflection on like how they value my time, because that's how I view it, I instead will just expect that from the person. So say this person always runs 30 minutes late. Okay, I will prepare for that and I will know. And I think that was me controlling my expectation and realizing if I can't control the person, control my feelings towards it. I hope I'm articulating this like clearly enough, but essentially I think the crux of it is that like control what you can control, right? And what you can control is yourself. And you can't control that person and being late. And there's kind of no point in trying to change a person and say like, hey, be on time for things. Like it hurts my feelings, because that's their expectation. And that's what they bring as a person to things. So that's what they are okay with. So someone might feel like, oh, it's fine to like bail. Also very annoying, but that's just what they do. So I would make a plan with them and I would expect she might bail. And when she does bail, don't get disappointed because I already expected it. So I think like it's like friendship and like relationships with people is all about like setting the expectation for yourself, and being able to control your end of it. Because I do think like every time now that I've done that, I've always just felt very in control and not let down. And I don't want to have to deal with those negative emotions of, oh, they bailed, that's really annoying, it's really upsetting, like kicking up a huff about it, because when I expect it, I don't get hurt. Yeah. I think another aspect of having this view with friends, and a healthy view to have, is learning to not have to be liked and loved by everyone. And I think this is such an interesting concept for me because I do have friends who I feel like are so social, so good at mingling with people. Like we'll go on a night out and they'll become like really good friends with people. And I'm like, do I seem really cold? Am I really like not somebody that people are interested in? Because I just don't get the same level of friendship. But I think it's the sooner you can come to terms with like, hey, you can't be friends with everyone. Like, and maybe your personality is like you don't want to be friends with everyone and that just doesn't suit you. That's fine. because the faster you can do that, the sooner you can worry about like building healthier friendships with those people around you that you click with and that you click with and that you can naturally hang out with. And so I think it's just learning to like put your energy into the right friendships. And I'll talk a little bit more about like what that means in terms of the right friendships and what my kind of like rules and like ideas I have around that is. But I think, yeah, you really do not need to be liked and loved by everyone. And there's literally no way you can. Humans are so different, so diverse. Everyone has a different experience. And it's something you should learn at an early age so that you don't like waste your time trying to please people. Because I think being a people pleaser is very exhausting on you. And it means that you don't really serve yourself as much. Yeah. All right. We're having a halftime break because it's called Peanut Butter Neya Time. We are always going to talk about some sort of peanut butter fact or peanut butter brand. So my favorite peanut butter, this is a fact about me and peanut butter. My favorite peanut butter is crunchy peanut butter. I do not know why people like smooth peanut butter. I don't know what's wrong with y'all. No judgment, but judgment. But crunchy peanut butter is just like, and you know what's the best type of crunchy peanut butter? Like the roasted. It's like a roasted peanut butter and it's crunchy. It's got this like aromatic flavor. It's smoky. It's so tasty. So if you guys see a roasted crunchy peanut butter out there, hit it up. Get around it. It's so good. So good. All right. Now let's go back to rules around friendships. So we've covered like why I think we should have a low expectation for friends. And so I think rule number 1 is have a low expectation from the start. Set your expectation at a 0 and let them like, and observe the person and understand like what that person is like, what their behavior is. And it's not even in like a negative way. It's just like, I think it's like a logical way to approach a friendship. It'd be really unreasonable if you just met somebody and you were like, I'm going to expect that they're going to be exactly like me. There's just no way. Like humans are so different. Better to just go in there and say like, hey, I'm putting myself out there. I think this friendship could be really interesting. I'm going to give it like my level, my normal level. Like I'm going to turn up on time. I'm going to be like, go out of my way to help them. And like just do all the things that you think a friend should do. And then see how they behave and what their level is. And then once you've realized, probably after like at least 5 times of hanging out, then I can think you can just set your expectation level there and be like, hey, that's where it is. And just not be disappointed. And to be honest, I shared this with my mom and my sister a long time ago, and they have always thought like taken this view now. And I feel like they find it quite valuable. Because it really helps to manage your like expectation and disappointment. And I think if you're a person out there that feels like I just keep doing this and that for people and just like I'm not appreciated, and you know, why doesn't anybody have the same like level of effort with friendship? Try this out because I do think it will help. But overall, I feel like it's just learning to manage expectations generally. Just control what you can control, which is generally yourself. Yeah. So what I think good friendships look like and are really healthy are friendships that are not hard to maintain. Like those friendships out there that are like super toxic when people are like, oh, like I have to call you and text you like X amount of times. Like see you at X amount of times to like maintain like close to you. I just think those friendships are too much. They should not be taxing like your energy and your time. They should be elevating and uplifting you. And I think that's like moves my next point is I think every person that you bring into your life like has to add value, you know. And I think this comes into romance and like finding somebody, and we can talk about that another time, but you always want to look to add value to your life, right? And I think sometimes this gets a little bit hard, I feel like, with old friendships. I do have some old friendships, like I've been friends with so long with the person, and they can be pretty toxic. And I think to the outset, other people are like, oh, this person is so toxic, I can't believe you're friends with them. But for you, it's different because I've been like, I feel like with those friends, I've like been friends with them for so long that there's just no way I couldn't be friends with them. But at the same time, I acknowledge their toxicity, but I don't let it like creep in and affect me. I think as soon as a friendship gets toxic or that person starts to impose into your life in a negative way, that you should just take a step back. And it doesn't mean you have to not be friends with the person. It's just taking a step back and thinking, how do I manage this? And I think it comes back to the expectation thing, is like, okay, this person at some points might be really toxic, so I won't spend X amount of days with this person on a trip. I will spend 3 days with this person because that's like a good amount, and we'll keep busy and we'll do X, Y, Z. That's my threshold and that's my limit. So I do think it comes back to, for that point, just like managing it. Manage the friendship by setting expectations and just being like a bit rational about it, right? If you're going to go on holiday with someone for 10 days and you know that they're going to drive you crazy after a certain amount of days based on experience, then you set a limit, set a cap, right? Do what you got to do. Right. So yeah, I think just friendship should be like not hard to maintain, should not be toxic. And then I think you should be able to be your full self. But I think this is really tricky, and I don't know if you guys also experience this, but I do find that with my friends, I'm like a different version of myself with different people. And I think this kind of happens naturally through meeting people at different stages in your life, right? So like my high school or primary school friends, they see a very different side of me. Like they've known me since high school. Maybe I was a bit more immature. Maybe I've always kind of had a certain dynamic or role in the friendship or personality. Then it kind of stays true to that of being like that. And then the people that you meet later on in your life, you can be a little bit more truer to your like more evolved self, I would say. So I feel like people who I've met later on in my life, I'm more maybe more chill. Am I more chill? I feel like I'm more chill and a bit more mature. I think my like high school friends, I'm probably viewed as more like a little bit more immature, chill, but like also crazy, because I think in high school I was a bit of like a spaz. I am still a spaz, let's just be clear with that. So I feel like my newer friends don't know my spaz self as much, and my spaz self definitely doesn't come out as like aggressively as when I was younger. And I just think that that is by nature when you meet the people and like the dynamic that you have. But I do think, like, contrary to what I do think you should try and be more of your full self with everybody, because everyone should accept you as that person, and you shouldn't feel like you can't be. But I think being your full self also comes back to like what I was saying about high school friends and fitting into groups. You shouldn't have to do things to like change who you are to be able to fit into a friendship or a group, right? Something I find really interesting, actually, bringing this up, is so when I started university, I took a gap year after high school, and then I went to university. And when we were in uni, high school, we would like have a few drinks, but I mean, I think I drank like one cruiser when I was like 17, and like try to climb a fence. If my friends who are listening, who are there, we know that happened. But I do think when we got to university, I was kind of taken aback, because I feel like, especially for Asian Australian like communities, there was a lot of interest and like obsession with trance music. And I think this became this huge, like very big events culture, which still exists now. And it's kind of like a initiation into university now. Like it's like joining a sorority. Like it's like this events culture where everybody goes, they all like dress the same, look the same, do drugs, dance the same. Like it's a whole kind of, I feel like it's almost like a cult. But but it's definitely like this initiation that everyone feels like they have to go through in university in a certain like demographic of people. And I think it was really similar to in high school when a trend would come along. Like I remember when everyone was wearing trigger pants and it was like the coolest thing to wear, or Pandora bracelets. It was like everyone had to get a Pandora bracelet. It's just this like herd mentality, right? Of like everyone getting like don't want to like be left out. And sometimes I do think, do you all really actually like that music? And did you like it before you joined these groups? And is this your truest self? And I think that is also like, let's not get this is confused with like trying out new things and discovering new activities with people. I think there's like definitely room and space for that, and I'm all about that. But then there's also like changing who you are to be accepted and fit into a group. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic in society that you have to tread a very, very careful thin line between it. It's very blurred about when you kind of, is your identity formed by the people you're around with and because you want to fit in with them, or is your identity formed because you actually like those things and you've been exposed to it? So I think just be really mindful about being your full self and showing up to that and being okay with like being different. I think I'm relatively different to a lot of my friends and people around me, and I think that's also in high school why I floated, because I didn't really feel like I identified with any specific group, but I think being able to be different is really what makes you unique. So I would say don't suppress that if you feel like you are a different person, and play to your strengths. Like if you are different, that's fine. You don't have to have a group. You just have friends. Yeah. So I think just rounding off the being a full self. The next thing is I do think I think this plays into kind of what I was saying before, but like make sure you can learn and grow from this person. So add value, right? You want to be surrounded by people that, and I think I've seen this quote everywhere, like be surrounded by people who are smarter than you. That doesn't mean like academically smarter. Like they could have really interesting knowledge, like niche knowledge, on like camping or like starting a fire with just by itself in nature without like a fire starter, right? Just be learning from those people around you in different ways. And this is not about intelligence. It's just about having, I think, people around you with a breadth of experience and varied experience. I think there is less value in being surrounded by people who all know the same thing, all do the same thing, and being pressured into like feeling to have those interests, to have to do certain things in life at certain points. I think as long as you can keep your friendship groups really diverse, then you will always have a really interesting view and not afraid to like be your full self, right? So that's my point. Yeah, so I think the last 2 points kind of feed off what I just said. So I think 1, be mindful of people's toxic traits and manage that. So that's what I was saying before about having toxic friends. It's okay for them to exist in your life, just manage it. And then lastly, you really do not need to be the same person. We are all so different. You do not need to be the same. People will love you for who you are. And I think sometimes people get scared like, oh, someone's not going to like that I'm into like Beanie Kids still and I'm 26. It's fine. Be into Beanie Kids and be 26. I'm into Brown Bear, which is a Lion character, and I'm 27. Boo-hoo. Right? Just be who you want to be and don't be afraid to show all your colors. So yeah, I think for healthy friendships and maintaining friendships moving forward in life, I think the biggest thing you guys can take away from this is that have a low expectation, and not in a negative way. You're not saying like, hey, this person's going to disappoint me, so I'm setting my expectation at low. You're saying, hey, let's be realistic. I don't really know you that well. This is who I am as a friend, and let's see who you are as a friend. And then let me set my expectation there so we can have a good friendship, because I'm interested in being friends with you and learning more from you and growing this friendship. Yeah. Last thing, make sure everybody in your life adds value. Don't keep people in your life that you are dragging you down or not helping elevate you as a person. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to my very first podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear from you. Comments in either the YouTube video, or you can DM me on Instagram at Supertanayan, topics that you want to talk about or hear about. I would love to do that, and just like a breakdown of ideas and things. Thank you for listening. Bye.